was so frustrated getting out of school and just seeing like these very inaccessible spaces because I didn't know the right people. So I vowed to myself that I would try and find a way into these spaces and literally throw the door wide open and demystify like what it's like getting onto these lists or like doing this.
You're listening to the CG Spectrum podcast. CG Spectrum College of Digital Art and Animation offers specialized career training for the film and game sector. Join our hosts, Career Development Manager Maxine and CGS mentor Justin Molman, as they chat with industry experts doing cutting-edge work in film and games. Now, on to the show.
This week, I was chatting with Sarah Spiers. She is currently the Interim Director of the IGDA Foundation. She's also a senior producer at PubG. She was recently named the Forbes 30 Under 30, and she's in the Women in Games Hall of Fame for 2021. I don't know if you're excited. I'm excited just talking about this again.
Yeah, I'm excited, but also exhausted hearing everything she's doing. So.
We talked a lot about hiring for the industry and how to get into the industry. Resumes, interviews, so much good content in there. So yeah, check it out. Why don't we start there? How did you get into the foundation? And now you're the interim director. Like, how did you move up? How did you get started? Because I think you started as like one of the people who applied, right? Like
I did.
Just like one of the students. Yeah.
Yeah, so the fun story is I actually applied the first time to what was called at the time the WIG Ambassadors Program, and I was rejected, and I got really upset about that. And then I said, well, I'm going to spend 1 year to become the perfect candidate, and that's what I did when I was in school. I started a game dev club, made games, went out and talked to people in my community, and then I applied to both Scholars and WIG Ambassadors, and actually got both, and I had to pick, and I picked Scholars.
So when you really put your mind to something, you end up with another problem.
Yeah, and it was really flattering. But I went with Scholars. And then, so I went to GDC in 2017. At the time, the Scholars program was run by Molly, Justin, and Eric, I believe. And they actually left the IGDA Foundation, right? Like, I was their last cohort. And I think they went on to do other things. And so Jen McLean, who was the executive director at the time, was looking for a new Scholars team. And what had happened was that she had talked to my friend Oleg, who I had known through a different apprenticeship program. And he was going to become the Scholars director. And he asked me to apply as a coordinator. And so I did, and I got the gig. And so then I was just a coordinator for a while. And then Nika joined as the new executive director after a couple of years, and COVID hit. And we pivoted online. And I think the reason I made my way up the foundation ladder was because I was probably a little obnoxious. Nika came to Wisconsin to talk at a conference, and I reached out to her and I was like, hi, I'm in Wisconsin and I'm going to this conference. And we became friends, and she was very nice and gave me some opportunities to prove myself, and I did okay. And then from then on, I just kind of ran our virtual programs. I ran our professional development program. We also had a prototype fund program and a scholarship program, and I helped with all of those. And then Nico decided to leave to go do some other things. And the board said, who knows about the foundation in the foundation? And I said, I do. And they said, okay, I guess. They took a chance on me, and I'm very thankful for that. But that's basically how I got started. I just I Googled the program, applied to the program, eventually got in, and then just stuck with it for a really long time.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the formula, right?
Right. I mean, yeah, it's not different, or I guess it feels weird to me because I know a lot of my friends will hop around every 2 years, which is totally valid and fine to do, and that's career advancement. Yeah. So it's just really strange to me sometimes when I think about that I've been at the foundation for so long, but it's been such a huge part of my career and something that's really meaningful to me that I really wanted to stay in whatever capacity I could, whether it's volunteer, staff, lead, whatever.
You just described what sounds like a full-time job. Like, all the things that you're doing for the foundation sounds like a lot, but that isn't your main job. So tell me a little bit more about your actual career, or the main part of it that probably takes up most of your time outside of the foundation. So you are a senior producer at PubG. That's correct, yes. Right? When you first started as a coordinator, or even just applying to the foundation in that very first stage, just to get into the program, was that before or during your time actually working at a game studio?
So in college, about a year and a half in, I decided I wanted to go into games, and I had this really long, convoluted long game kind of plan for how I was going to do that. And I actually interned or worked at, in various capacities, different like educational game studios while I was in college. So there was like a tech company called quill.org, which I think might be quill.com now. I don't know. But they did English learning stuff, and they had a game project that I don't think ever launched, but I worked on that. So this will make sense, I promise. I was working at the Engagement Lab for a bit. While I was there, I also took on work with the Deep End Games, which was an indie studio based in Boston, Massachusetts. And that's when I applied to the IGDA Foundation stuff, was when I was working for the Deep End Games. They're still thriving and doing stuff over there. Go check out their project. I think they're still working on Romancylvania, which is a The Bachelor meets Castlevania, and it's cool. Go check it out. After Deep End Games, I did some contract work with Earplay Inc., which was a bunch of interactive audio stuff on like Alexa devices, which was honestly no shade to any of my other jobs I've ever had. It was probably the coolest because it was so new and different, and nobody knew what they were really doing in the field. So we got to be weird and experimental about it. And I worked on some stuff for Mr. Robot. And then like the very, very tiny, teeny beginnings of some other projects there. It was really fun. But what wound up happening is after that contract gig was up, the Boston games industry was not in a super great place for people that were kind of early-ish in their careers. And so I really struggled to find a job. And I actually, on a whim on Thanksgiving, applied to a studio called Filament Games in Madison, Wisconsin, and I actually wound up getting the job with them and moved out to Madison. And that's kind of how the whole PubG thing happened, because while I was working at Filament, there was a development manager, AJ, who worked there, and he left shortly after I joined. And then 3 or 4 years went by, and I worked at another studio in between Filament and PubG called Studio Dry Dock. But while I was at Dry Dock, someone reached out to me and was like, hey, PubG's interested and chatting with you. And I was like, why would PubG be interested in me? Because up until this point, like I had worked on educational games, like really cozy games, like really sweet stuff, or like stuff about, you know, like women's coming of age stories. I was like, this is like so far out there. Turns out that AJ was working at PubG. Very small world. So that's kind of what happened. And so I went over to PubG, and they've been absolutely fantastic. I currently work with our feature development team for PC and console. So if you are a PubG fan, if you are playing the game on PC and like a feature comes out, there's a high chance that was my team working on it. Please do not ask me anything though. I can't tell you anything, and I can't help you. I'm sorry. But that's my team. I just want to say that because
like call customer support. Leave me alone.
Yeah, you need to talk to our community manager. I know our creative director actually interacts with fan stuff too. It's not that I don't care about people; it's that I am just literally not the person you want to talk to.
Yeah. It's like I can't help you. I can't help you.
Yeah, if you see me play PUBG, I'm not very great. One day I will get on Twitch and I'll stream it just so people know. I don't want anyone to get mad, but I want you to know I do care about the game. Anyway, that being said, that's kind of how I ended up at PUBG. And what I do there alongside that is I also work with our Culture Guild, which was kind of like our internal culture group where we help plan company initiatives such as like events, or we actually advocate for different health benefits. So we recently advocated for unlimited sick time, which was kind of cool.
Whoa.
So I know.
Everyone needs that, especially after COVID. It's like, come on,
right?
You know?
Yeah, we wanted to help destigmatize like taking mental health days, which is I think what a lot of folks really struggle with, because when we have like very visible or like physical illnesses, it's sometimes easier for us to justify, not always, but a lot of times it's easier for us to justify taking time off. I know it's harder for me when I'm not having a great day and I really ought to just take off. But now we have the ability to do that. And it's really helpful because our managers also take time off in that way too. So it doesn't feel like it's a benefit we can't use, right? So
it's like everyone should deserve that. And I know I struggled with this in the past, and like maybe you have too, but I used to always think of the most elaborate like reasons why, because sometimes just, you know, like having to take a mental health day or just feeling like a little bit under the weather, but I'm like, I know I'm not going to be productive at work today. And I think this started like way back in school when I was a kid. I was just like a bad kid that liked to skip class, but
no,
but
school's not great these days, to be honest. I don't know how kids do it. I'm like, y'all are too strong. That's awesome.
I know. Some days you would wake up and be like, I just can't today. Like mentally, there's some days where you just can't do it. And I never felt like it was that was enough. You know, I always felt like I had to give my manager, especially when I was younger, like some kind of like something for them to be like, okay, like stay home. You know, eventually when I became a manager and like had more responsibilities, like, you know, managing a team, people would always kind of come to be like, oh, like I'm not feeling well, or like they'd come into work anyway, and I would often just be like, you got to go home. They're like, no, but I'm just gonna do this. It's like, no, like all of this stuff can wait. And it's like my job, and you know, your job as well as a producer, to like figure out another solution. You know what I mean? So what? Someone's not here for a day? Like we'll be fine. You know what I mean? Sometimes, especially when you're a junior or you're just starting out, you feel like it won't be fine. You know what I mean? You feel like the whole world is going to come crashing down. So I think this is such an important thing to bring awareness to, and like to get more studios on board with, and more management on board with, you know, because how many times have I worked at a place where someone does take a sick day and some person makes a comment like, I bet they're not that sick or something. It's like, come on.
I don't know where I read this or heard this, but it resonates so much with me, which is if you don't take a break, your body will choose when you're going to take a break without consulting you. And I think that's what I see happening a lot, at least right now when we're working remotely, which is we are at home. So we get this idea that we're like at home. So it's clearly not as draining, right? But it's not true. It's still incredibly draining. It's still tired. And then now your body is like choosing to, you know, get sick or like be really tired and fatigued, but you're still stuck in your house. I don't know. It's just this whole cycle.
One thing that used to happen to me all the time when I would get burnt out is I would like just barely make it, you know, to the end of a project. And then I would have some vacation booked, like something actually planned. And then I would always get sick because that was when my body was like, my body could tell that we're like, okay, we're in relax mode. I'm going to just get all this out of the way. And like, I get sick. I would feel like mentally bad. Like it was like everything would always hit at once. And it's like, no, I'm supposed to go on vacation now. But your body chooses.
That was actually me in school. Yeah. At the end of every semester, stomach flu, mono, whatever. Just like the most awful things. I never got a break. It was awful because then you're not getting a break. Really.
Yeah.
I mean, you are, but you're not.
No. Okay. I'm happy that that's like, it wasn't just me, but yeah, I felt like it was like if I pushed myself too hard, my body chose when that break was, and it would choose the time that it knew. It was like, oh, we've scheduled this time.
We scheduled the sick time, whether you wanted it to be sick time or not.
Hey everyone, a quick shout out to CG Spectrum for helping make this podcast happen.
CG Spectrum is an online animation, VFX, digital painting, and game development school that prepares you for a career in film and games. Whether you're just starting out or you're upgrading your skills, get personalized career training and mentorship from industry pros who have worked on blockbuster films and best-selling games. Courses are 100% online, and you can choose from one-on-one private mentorship options or group classes with just 4 students max. You'll also get access to career support services and join an awesome community full of like-minded creatives just like you. Learn more at cgspectrum.com. We're bringing the industry to you.
Earlier, you mentioned something when you were talking about the very beginning of your career, and like as you were finishing school, how you had this sort of this like long plan. You're like, oh, I had this like long-term plan, this goal. Tell me, like, did it actually work out how you planned back then? Like as a student, like were your insights actually correct, or did you find that like, oh, this plan was crazy? I did something completely different. Like tell me about that.
So the first half worked like a charm. The second half didn't. It's kind of concerning. I was telling my friends the other day, they're like, that's a little weird. And I was like, okay. So what I wanted to do, the engagement lab, again, media lab games, it was very difficult to get into. They had assistants who you could get hired as an assistant. They paid pretty well. Everyone wanted to work there. And I was like, okay, I've got to set myself apart. So I was a freshman at this point, and I wanted to get in by the time I was like a junior. I said, okay, I need a really good portfolio. I need to have a good network, and I need to have like some kind of advocate on the inside of the studio, right? It's kind of tied into the network. So the portfolio thing was pretty straightforward. I made games whenever I could in my classes. Emerson's really great since they're a media school. So they would let you do like these really weird final projects. So like in my philosophy class, I was like, I'm going to make a game that explores this philosophical concept. And my teacher was like, okay.
Oh, I love that. That is nice that they supported you like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I really loved Emerson for that. I know that not a lot of people will enjoy college, but I was one of those people that really loved it because I got to do weird things. But anyway, so I did that. I also scoured the job board in Boston, so we had a pretty thriving indie community. There weren't any jobs there, but there was somebody from Quill that was looking for a game designer, and I straight up messaged this person and was like, please give me an internship, please. And I convinced him, ? But anyway, so I managed to get some like kind of weird, funky internship with them. So that was like my experience. I made other games. And so I built the portfolio that way. So that was the portfolio component. Then the network component, this is where things get a little weird. So I learned who all worked at the engagement lab. I learned what classes they taught. And I tried to get in their classes, and if I couldn't, I made friends with people in the classes, and then I would hang out outside the classroom waiting for my friends to get out of class because I wanted the professors to get used to seeing me.
Oh my God, I love that.
Creepy. I'm so sorry. I know, like, I'm very privileged in the fact that everyone probably thought it was cute. I think in other contexts, it was probably creepy. So I want to acknowledge that. But I like tried to like get in the forefront of their minds. And
creepy would be like trying to find them on Tinder or something like that.
Yeah, okay,
like,
that
would
fair.
be creepy. You know
that's
what I mean?
Fair. I just think about like I don't want anyone to think that I was like actually like stalking them. I wasn't. I was just trying to like be in their radar. And I would also go network in the industry because I thought that I wasn't like going to try and find jobs from the people I was connecting with at these events. I was hoping that I could make my network wide enough that it would overlap with their network. And so if my name ever came up in conversation, people would be able to be like, oh yeah, that's Sarah. She's really nice. So that was like that plan. And I actually met a lot of really nice people that I'm still friends with to this day. And it was kind of nice because I think they could tell I wasn't hustling them for a job. Like I wasn't trying to get hired at their studio. I just wanted to like know who they were and what they did. And then the last part of this plan, which is actually, I think, the part that I'm most proud of, even though it is not the most difficult. So since I was part of the honors program at Emerson, it meant that after my freshman year, I got to choose an advisor. A lot of people would choose an advisor in their discipline. However, I didn't have any games people at my school. But you know who was a potential advisor? The head of the engagement lab. So I went to him and I was like, please let me be your advisee. And he was actually really nice, and he was actually incredibly helpful in my career at school. He pointed me to some really awesome classes that were not games related to help me kind of learn how to think about, you know, everything from different perspectives and broaden my mindset and whatever. But I did mention to him I wanted to work at the engagement lab, and he asked me what I did, and he said I was a strong candidate. And so when they opened up a job, I had this portfolio with some educational game experience, like this whole network of people that could vouch for me. And I had this sign off from this guy. I got the job. I like to think that that was why I got it, but they could have just looked at my resume and was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Or they might have been like, if we don't admit her, she will literally just stay here forever.
Yeah. Let's get her out of here.
But anyway, so that was like the first half of the plan. It was really successful. The second half is I wanted to work in a AAA studio when I graduated. And I'm telling you right now that I failed in that. And I was actually pretty devastated because by the time I had graduated from college, I had worked for Quill, Engagement Lab, Deep End Games. I had gone through an apprenticeship with this program called Mass Digi, which was fantastic. I had tons of actually like shipped games from studios on my portfolio. I had made really good grades. I had taken pretty relevant classes. I had like gone to General Assembly and spent money to like learn project management stuff on the weekends. I had won the IGDA Foundation stuff. I had volunteered with a local nonprofit and I was their college outreach coordinator. Like I had like a resume that was beefy and I got no hits. I actually applied to like 60 plus, which is really not a lot, but absolutely nothing. Now, and I've told this story to students before, and I think there was two things happening. One, the industry was not super great for junior level folks. Two, I don't know who gave me this advice. I hate them. I made my resume in Photoshop.
Oh, no. That's that. Shit. That's the first thing that I noticed, because if someone sends me like a JPEG, I'm like, what did you make this in? Was it Illustrator or Photoshop? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, stop everything you're doing now.
If you were trying to work at a big AAA company, that Photoshop application, it's not going to work. In the indie space, maybe, because people are more likely to just be parsing through them all, looking through them all. And so it worked out in my favor. With Filament, I wound up using this thing called Nuovo Resume to make my resume. And I think that I still wouldn't have gotten hired anywhere, but I know for a fact that they look through every single resume by hand.
Right,
so I think that's why I got picked. And truthfully, from there on out, I never was picked up by any big companies because I think I kept using these softwares that made very beautiful resumes that, you know, these systems couldn't really parse through.
And it's all the applicant tracking systems. It's
a thing. This past weekend, I finally just said whatever. I had a bunch of friends who were redoing their resumes, and I try and do stuff and support with them. So I just redid mine, and I ran it through a tracker, and I was like, it's garbage. So I actually have like a real resume now, about 7 years into my career. So please don't make the same mistake, folks.
Just for people who are listening, who are like very confused about this, I just want to give a little bit of background. So, and this is something I realized later in life. This goes for film, TV, any like large company, even in like the tech industry. They use what's called an ATS, which is an applicant tracking system. And it does a lot of things. It helps recruiters sort people. It helps them mark like, who did we call? Who did we not call yet? But the one thing that it does is it basically scans your resume and it looks for keywords, and they like match it or they kind of compare it to the job description or the job posting. So it's kind of like in university where you have those like those plagiarism tests. Like every time you write an essay, like the teacher will run it through like a plagiarism test. It's like that, except you want it to match. Like you want a higher score. And it basically, what it does is the closer your resume matches to the job description, and it's not even like the names of the software. It's things like collaborates with others. And if you can like sprinkle that in there somewhere, it'll ping it. The more you match with the job description, the further up it'll move you in the list. And if you send them a JPEG or any kind of like photo where you can't, and you can test this, like people who are watching, they can test this with their interview, save it as a PDF. And if you can highlight the text and copy and paste it, you're good. The program needs to recognize the text and it'll move you to the top of the list. So anyone with like a JPEG resume, it's showing up as 0% match. Right. So even though you had all those things, those big studios, the recruiters just don't have time to look through everything, and they're just going to look at the cream of the crop at the top. Maybe they could go down further in the list if they don't find someone good, but you were amazing based on all of your background, but you just weren't getting seen. I see this happen all the time with students now. They're like, oh, I'm just not getting anything. And sometimes it's just a matter of like how it's organized, or we'll dig into it. It's never the same with every person, right. But it happens a lot where we're like, okay, let's figure out why no one's seeing you. Because on paper, you sound perfect. So let's try and like dig into like, what is the issue here? But yeah, I didn't have someone like me to walk me through that when I was starting. Neither did you. You know, it's so people are just swimming, like trying to do something. And sometimes all the right things still aren't enough. You have to worry about all this boring stuff like resumes. What? So annoying.
Yeah, because like, I was told your resume needs to look pretty. Your resume needs to look pretty. It needs to look appealing. You want to know something? A lot of the people that I've hired, because I've worked on hiring teams, or I've actually been a hiring manager, and as it started out, I don't care if your resume is pretty. Like at the end of the day, like sure, like okay, maybe your resume is really boring, but if you can do the job, I'm not hiring you to make a resume.
Exactly.
Right?
For me, I think there's because if you Google like cool resume templates, most of them are, in my opinion, garbage because they look pretty, you know, and they're like, oh, this is interesting, but you have like graphs on a resume. Like no one needs a graph for a resume.
Don't do the blank out of 5. No,
yeah,
I hate them.
Thank you so much for validating my feeling.
My immediate reaction is, I don't understand how you're quantifying this. I don't know if you have imposter syndrome, or if you're arrogant, or if you just like have no idea. Like, what does a 2 out of 5 on Photoshop mean?
Exactly. Yeah. What's 5 out of 5? Is 5 out of 5 like the best artist in the world, or is 5 out of 5 the best you can do and you're just slacking? Like, people are shooting themselves in the foot every day. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it's like, but most, at least students that I see, almost never put 5 out of 5 for anything. And I'm like, so you're not good at anything, you know? And it's like, you're shooting yourself in the foot. People are going to judge your skill level based on your portfolio, first and foremost. The other thing too is that what one person at PubG, you know, thinks your skill level is might be different from someone else who works at like some smaller mobile game studio, or maybe some other bigger studio like Ubisoft.
Right.
Like people's perceptions of your skill levels also vary. So you telling someone 3 to 5, it's like, yeah, what is 5? Like what
is a 5?
A well-designed document doesn't need frills. It just needs to be like all one font, you know what I mean? And like maybe something is bold, or like to make something easy to read doesn't mean that it has to be fancy. I think that's the thing that people struggle with.
I mean, the way to think about it, I think, and I have to tell myself this too, is a resume is not trying to get you hired. A resume is getting your foot in the door for an interview. That's all it is. Once you've gotten the interview, then that's really what it's writing on, is that interview. And they just use the resume to formulate questions, really. So just think of it that way, and I think it's a lot less intimidating. Because the whole piece of paper isn't your future. That whole piece of paper, well, I guess it is, but the whole piece of paper is like whether or not they ask you, like, do you want to work here? Can you work here? Like, that's really what that is. That's all that is. So.
Oh, thank you for
You're welcome.
validating my whole feelings about this.
I will always validate this. There's a lot of bad resume advice going around these days. I'm on LinkedIn all the time. I'm just like, what is going on?
We've been talking a lot about what not to do, and we've ranted a little bit of some of our common feelings about resumes. But like we said, a resume is just this little part of the process that's really more for like, you know, recruiters and other people to contextualize the information than anything else. So what tips do you have for, you know, game developers or aspiring game producers? What are some tips of people or for people? What should they do? What are some other helpful suggestions that you have? What are these characteristics you're looking for?
So there's a couple, and they range from like very minor to actually, I think, super helpful. So the first minor one is that when we are looking at people's resumes, we can tell generally how much experience you have, regardless of how you present yourself, based off of how you describe your work, because there's a lot of industry jargon that we use, and that signals to us what kind of environment you've worked in before and how much experience you have. Like, for instance, if someone says like, I tested a game, that's one thing. But if they're like, performed exploratory testing, blah, 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 I'm like, okay, you had some kind of that. So what I suggest to folks is literally go and find other people's resumes, or go look on LinkedIn to see how they describe their work and see what kind of language they use. And now don't try and just like stick every like word into yours, but just learn how people describe the work that they do, because that's going to be the stuff that matches you with the ATS. That was another problem I think I had. Like, I didn't realize that what I was doing when I was a PA was helping with allocation reports. Like, what is that? It's basically understanding like what are our resources and how they are allocated throughout the studio and project. I didn't know that's what it was called. And that would have been really helpful. Just like understanding, again, the specific terminology relevant to what you want. And honestly, I feel like if you don't understand or you don't know, there are plenty of people that would be happy to explain. I think there's a spreadsheet going around on Twitter of game developers who are happy to answer questions. Literally, I would just be like, hey, I know you're really busy right now, but I'm trying to understand my discipline that I'm focusing on a little better. If someone messaged me and said, Sarah, what is an allocation report on Twitter? I would answer that question. That's really easy. I can do that, and I'm happy to help you, and that'll give you context. So that's the first thing I recommend doing, because that can help signal experience. It also just helps you feel more confident about yourself and help you describe yourself better. The other thing I recommend for folks once you actually get to interviews, because I know that a lot of really junior devs struggle with interviews and like preparing for interviews. This is kind of my secret, not so secret, I guess, recipe for that. Prepare 3 stories: a time you succeeded, a time you failed and what you did about it, and then a time you had to think creatively and solve a problem in a different way. And with those 3 stories, I promise you can answer any question. Really, you can.
Yeah.
Because they'll be like, what's your strengths? What your weaknesses? Like, what was a difficult project you worked on? Like, literally, you can just answer all of that with those 3 questions, those 3 stories.
Trying to study questions is not the way around it. Like, you need to kind of, and this sounds so cheesy as I'm thinking in my head, you need to study yourself. Like, you need to really know who you are, or, you know, to be able to speak about your project even. Some people, they're not well versed in their own projects, you know, to be able to like really accurately describe what you did from beginning to end, but like in a technical way. Don't just gloss over things. Maybe if you're only talking to like a recruiter, you can kind of gloss over some stuff because it'll go over their head. But if you're meeting with like the lead game designer or the lead programmer, like you can get technical and you can really describe how you did things. So they know it wasn't just following a tutorial or something like that, you know?
Right.
It's all about that personal experience. Because yeah, they could ask like, and nowadays they're avoiding like the really common questions because everyone knows how to answer like what your biggest weakness is, you know? And so people they're like adapting, and yeah, it's all about scenarios or stories. I love that.
Yeah, you're right. The questions are getting weirder. And I can't speak for engineers, because I want to say anyone who does a technical job, I feel for you, because I have a friend who works in tech and she was telling me her interview process, and I think I would cry because it's like technical things, someone programming and like looking over your shoulder. Like, no, as a producer, all of our interviews are very like, what is your charisma score? And like, how can you talk about things?
Lucky us. Yeah, it's like, can you chat for half an hour? It's like, yep, no problem.
probably can. And I do have some more advice after this, but the thing is like, some of the questions I've gotten, which are interesting, I just want to share them with folks so they can prepare.
Please.
At least with production, you deal with people, product, and process, and how would you prioritize those and why? And I got this one from Studio Dry Dock, and it was my favorite question I've ever received, because the answer for folks who are interested in knowing what I said people first, because without people you can't make video games. Then process, because this helps you facilitate safe ways to build video games. And then the product is least important to me because I prefer people more. And honestly, I can work on projects I'm not super keen on as long as I care about my teammates, right? That's the thing for me. And some people might prioritize it differently. There isn't a right or wrong answer. It's just kind of like the philosophy of the studio. So if you answer it incorrectly, it's mostly that just your values don't align, and it's probably for the best that you're not working there.
Yeah.
Other questions, how do you build camaraderie in a virtual environment? Which was an interesting one. Like, how do you build rapport with the team that's working together when you're joining in the middle of a pandemic? Another one is, how do you work with, like, how do you give feedback to people? Like, what's your strategy? And for those of you who are interested in knowing, I highly recommend this book called Giving Effective Feedback by the Harvard Business School, because it is the best book I've ever read on that. It's literally, I have the entire series on my desk at all times.
It's just like sitting there waiting.
Right. Yeah.
I
it's
love
really
that.
good.
I gotta check it out.
It's okay. I'm trying to pull it out so you can see how small. It's like you can read it in like an hour. It's so small. It's called like the 20-minute manager series. The whole idea is that you can read it in a day.
I think I've heard about that. Yeah.
I love them. But yeah, that's that. And then I don't think I've gotten any like bizarre out there questions. I mean, I've had people be like, what's your producer superpower? And mine is like, you dump me in the middle of a project on fire, and that's usually where I thrive. I don't like that, but I do well, I guess, in that. And I think it's because I come in with a
please
cool
don't
head.
do that though.
Yeah, stop doing that to your producers. When people will wait until things are awful to hire producers sometimes, and I'm like, y'all are mean. Because we show up and then you want us to succeed, and then we're like, everything's awful right now. I will try my best. But anyway, yeah, there's that. And then the other piece of advice,
I can relate.
Yeah, the other piece of advice I want to give people, and I especially want to direct this towards folks of marginalized identities, do stop deciding that you're not going to get the job. Like, before you even go through with it. It's just like, stop deciding that you're not good enough for a job, and also stop bending over backwards to not take credit for your own work, which is advice I have to take as well. Like, there are a ton of us who are like, oh, it was a team effort. Own that you were really good. It's okay to say that you're really good. Arrogance is being like, I was the best and no one helped, and like, how dare you insinuate? That's arrogance. But it's okay to be like, yeah, I led this project. It was really successful. I'm very proud of the team, and I'm very proud of the work I did. That's not arrogance. That's just taking ownership over your own skill. And I want to see that more from students, because y'all are incredibly talented. And every single year when people apply to the Scholars Program at the foundation, y'all are more amazing and terrifying, and I would not stand a chance against y'all. I've seen art students come out of school, and I thought they were like senior level concept artists. I was like, what is going on? So please, like, trust yourself and believe that you're good enough, because like the studios will tell you if they don't want to work with you. Stop deciding that they don't want to work with you, because you'll be surprised how much they will actually value and want to work with you when you believe in yourself. That's such a huge thing. So that's like my big piece of advice is like, we can tell when you don't believe in yourself. So just pretend. I know fake it till you make it is awful advice, but it does work in some instances. And just pretend in the interview. You can cry after the interview, but during the interview, like be like, yeah, I'm really good. I worked on this project with my teammates in school, and it was really difficult because I was taking these classes at the same time and people were going through a lot, but we made it anyway. And I'd be like, dang, I know what that's like. I know what it's like when everyone's like having a mental breakdown, but we're still making a game. Right? It's still relatable. So,
and a lot of students I talk to, it's so sad sometimes, because some of them, they're like, they haven't even tried to apply. It's not even like in the interview that they're like worried. Usually by the time someone gets an interview, I'm like, you've basically made, like, you've caught someone's attention. The fact that you have an interview at all shows that you're on the right track. But I'm more worried about the people who don't even apply, because they see job descriptions that scare them. And sometimes I think they're almost designed like that on purpose, is to only bring out confident people. If like you're checking off all the boxes and you're worried about something that says like 2 years of experience, if that's the only thing that's holding you back, you should go for it anyway. I think I don't know why they still have that in some job descriptions. Like I get it. And then it's just anything under like 3 years. I'm like, you know,
I can clarify on this.
Yeah, tell me, because I've heard other things, but
I want to know what you've heard too. For folks who are applying to, or who are yet to apply, you're going to see a list of things, and it's going to be like 5 years experience and then a bunch of bullet points of things you need to do. This is called a pony list. It's like, imagine someone being like, I want a pony with beautiful pink hair and hooves that glow and whatever. They just like everything they could possibly want. But it's not actually like what everyone knows they're not going to get that exact bullet point list. And if a studio actually believes that, do not work at the studio. But it's just like, they want you to have a certain amount. Like if you don't have the software training, like that's probably fine. Like you can learn software. It's more about just the skill level and stuff. But if you're looking at years, this is how I generally would recommend it. And maybe don't even listen to me. Maybe this is wrong. But if you are trying to get a job in the industry, and you are seeing something that's like 5 or 6 years, that to me indicates like they want you to have experience working on a team and like working on a project in a studio setting. So that's kind of like your mid-level stuff. If they have 3 or less, that means that they are trying to catch people with no experience all the way to could possibly be mid, but they're not expecting that same level of like working in a professional environment. That's really what those years indicate. It's just like how much experience you theoretically would have gotten by the time you hit that year. That doesn't mean that you won't have that experience before then, because I'll tell you, I am about 7 years in. Most director roles in this industry are 10 plus years. Now, does that stop me from applying to director jobs? No. Do I need to be a director at a studio? I don't know. That's up to the studio to decide. But that's the thing, is it like you have to stop looking at the years as actual requirements and view them more as just like, what will I have learned during this time period in my career? Like from year 0 to 3, what experience would I have gotten? Now, if you're just getting out of school and you see that like Microsoft has a director level publishing job, maybe not for
like
you.
a lead artist or something. It's like, you're not gonna get that.
Who knows? You might. I would say people graduating, like look at like the 5, 6 and less, because sometimes you got a lot of kick-ass experience while you were still in school. Like there are some people who I think were still, I think the people that released Turnip Boy Commits Tax Fraud or whatever, tax evasion, that game that wound up like launching to the Switch, I think they were still in school when they made that. Like there are a lot of people, amazing. I know, right? If they're not in school, I'm really sorry, everyone. But I think they were still in school. Like they launched a game that got picked up by a publisher that's on Nintendo. Like I would probably argue that they probably have more than 0 years experience. I don't know. See, like that's the thing. So your mileage may vary, but when you're looking at these job descriptions, think of them as like, what experience would I have in this time of my career? and really like just don't get hung up on the number. I've seen people who have applied to mid-level jobs, not gotten that job, got a different job at that studio with an adjusted title. So there's you can win in this scenario. Don't let it scare you by any means. And maybe you'll get the job. Like you might just actually get the job. That's totally happened before.
But you won't know if you don't actually just try. Like it's better to get rejected than to not apply at all and be potentially missing out on something. Also, not every position that's right for a junior actually has junior in the title. Like a lot of students are coming to me, they're like, well, they just don't have any junior roles. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And they're like, well, it doesn't say junior. And it's like, yeah, that doesn't mean that it's not right for you. Like wording sometimes. I feel so bad because it really is hard. Like everyone acts like it's so easy to be a student, but it really isn't.
No.
Especially if you're not getting the right info. So yeah, I can give you I'll share some insight as to like some things that I heard about that. I mean, what I tell students is pretty much the same as you. And I tell them that like, listen, if you have like 7 out of the 10 bullet points, you should go for it. Don't let the 1 year thing like, prevent you from applying. But a scary thing, two scary things that I know. So one is that it's not always the department manager or like, the lead programmer who's actually writing these job descriptions. It's oftentimes a recruiter. And many times it's actually like copy and pasted from like, oh, we had an opening last year. Can we just repurpose that one? There's a little bit of that happening. And it's not always laziness. Sometimes it's just like, the department manager is just swamped. They have so much stuff to do that they can't rewrite one from scratch. They repurpose something. So there's that. And then the other thing is, and this is what really scared me. We got like a product demo of this ATS system that we're using by one of the salespeople from this company. And so they're walking us through the platform and like how the UI works and like, here's how you click for this. And they're showing us a bunch of examples. They get to the point of like putting up a job description and they're like, okay, here's how you upload your document. Or here's something that a lot of our recruiters love about our software is you could instead, if you don't have time to write one, you can search in our database of, look at your face. Yeah. You search a job title in our database. We have thousands of job descriptions in here that you can choose from. And now listen, I don't know if they have a ton in there for like our creative industries and stuff like that, but these are big systems that like a lot of big companies are using. And if it's easier for them and if they search and that title exists, you better believe that someone's going to save time and just use some template, right? So
I hate that.
Listen, I'm not saying that that's actually happening at every studio or anything like that, but the fact that it's a possibility just shows that like these little bullet points are not everything.
I was so frustrated getting out of school and just seeing like these very inaccessible spaces because I didn't know the right people. So I vowed to myself that I would try and find a way into these spaces and literally throw the door wide open and demystify like what it's like getting onto these lists or like doing this. Like I'm telling you, every single award I have ever gotten, I've gotten because I self-nominated, y'all. Unless I asked a friend, no one sat there and thought to write a nomination in for me. It was all me. Yeah. For instance, like when I got on the Forbes list, I was like, what is happening? What is it like once you get in? And I'll tell people what it's like when you get in. Because we have these like things, awards and whatever that happens in this industry. And we're very like tight-lipped about it. We don't want to talk about it. And that doesn't help anyone. So my goal is literally to just be like, sorry, I'm not gatekeeping anymore. Like this is actually what it is and how you get in, what happens when you get in. And that's what's important. When the Forbes list came out, I always go through the comments because I love feeling sadness, I guess. Comments are always brutal. And there were a couple of things that were said that I actually wanted to demystify a little bit. So one thing were people being like, everyone who got on this list paid for it. Well, I can assure you, I paid $0 to get onto this list. I'm sure there are people that had PR teams that nominated them.
Yeah. It's a marketing tool, right?
Right. It is. I mean, like if you have a PR team, like that's their job. I don't know. The other thing is some people, and I think I actually corrected this, where some people were like, why didn't they put the salaries down for all the like female identifying people? And the answer is because if we're not a business owner, we're not required to provide that information. And so we don't actually put that info down. The other thing that someone pointed out that I want to point out as well that speaks to a larger issue, not just in games, but in every industry, which is almost every single person of a marginalized gender on that list did not only their job, but did work in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It is as though that in order for us to be successful, we not only have to kick ass at our careers, but also be doing a completely separate other job. And that's what annoys me. That's what annoys me about these lists. The fact that I'm able to work at the foundation alongside my job is privilege. Being able to do a whole other thing is privilege because a lot of people have kids, take care of their families. Like maybe they work more than one job. Like they have to do stuff. And having the free time to take on extra stuff for the spotlight is like not a normal thing that a lot of people get to do.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about the Forbes list and any list really. And I don't want to diminish the work and effort of others because there are a lot of people that made it on that Forbes list that are actually not only successful in a capitalist society, but are also like really important and influential and very good and lovely and they deserve it. And I don't want to diminish that at all. But I really, again, caution people from looking at these lists as indicators of success because really what it does is it speaks to your ability to communicate your skill set. It also demonstrates how much time you've had to do other stuff. And there's also a component of luck too. And it's hard. The games industry has this idea of what success is, and it's like gatekeeping and weirdly, like it's that pie notion, but really it doesn't have to be. That's why I'm so passionate about getting people in games. And that's why no matter where I go, the foundation is a priority for me because that's what we do is we help people get into games and stay in games. And then they rise and they become better and then they surpass all of us. And we're like, wow, that's really awesome. that's how it should be, right?
Doesn't that feel so good too? Like,
selfishly, I feel really good when people are successful. Yeah.
Me too. Like when I see one of my like coworkers or like someone I worked with succeed, like I love it so much. Like I think that's why I love this job so much is because I'm like directly helping people to like figure out their life. Like because at the end of the day, this isn't just a job. It's not just like a job in games. Like these are people's lives. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anywhere that we can find you? Like, do you have something you want to promote or do you have a new game coming out?
So I have a Twitter that you can, I'm going to try and use it more. I say that every time, but we'll see. It's at @Spiers_K, and then Spiers is spelled Spiers. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Sarah Spiers. I have like this really uncanny headshot, which I use for everything. But then to promote stuff, PubG, everyone knows PubG. So I want to actually highlight a game called Wildflowers that I worked on while I was at Studio Dry Dock. It is right now just on the arcade, but there should be announcements about other platforms at some point this year. And it is a game that centers around the experiences of marginalized people and deals with themes of friendship and love and magic. And it basically, if you like Stardew Valley but you want it to be a little more magical and a little more narrative driven, like this is the game for you. It's really cute. Please play it. Please play it. The team worked so hard on this and I love them so much and I miss them, and they really deserve all the success they can get.
Yay! We will definitely check that out. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to the CG Spectrum podcast. For more on this episode, visit us at cgspectrum.com/podcast. Check out our show notes where you'll find links to our guests and more behind the scenes. And if you're enjoying the show, please like, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening, or share this episode with someone who might like it. See you next time.